He's opinionated. He's unapologetic. He's always real. He is Brett Mason. This is the Brett Mason Show.
So you can call in if you would like to call in on the phone and be a part of the live podcast. You can do that. The number is 334-403-4500. 334-403-4500 is the number. Of course, if you're watching on Blab, you can type your questions into the chat box. You can also request to take a seat, and we'll try to talk to you that way as we discuss this new news that's come out today, that the Department of Justice is now changing its focus away from threats like ISIS and Al-Qaeda and focusing more on domestic terrorist. In my best George W. Bush impersonation, the terrorist. Beware the terrorist. So let's just take a quick look at this. Assistant Attorney John Carlin is the person who oversees national security over at the Department of Justice. Announced they are now taking a new position on terrorism and the safety of Americans following some violent attacks on American soil that are motivated by, quote unquote, and this is the key to why all this is really, really bad. Motivated by, quote, anti-government views, racism, bigotry, anarchy, and other, quote unquote, despicable beliefs. So apparently now despicable beliefs are illegal. What you believe is now a crime. What you believe is now something that can get you targeted by the Department of Justice. People, remember what was the movie with crazy psycho Scientologist boy? What's his name? God, he was in Risky Business and Top Gun. Tom Cruise. Remember, wasn't it Minority Report with him where they started arresting people for thought crimes? You think about something being illegal, and because it's illegal, you could get arrested before anything ever happened. At least in that movie, things were somewhat based on actual crimes, I think, up to a point before it sped out of control. Now you have the assistant to the Attorney General, the person who is in charge of overseeing the Justice Department and terrorism, just coming out and blatantly saying, we believe now that the greatest threat to America is Americans. Americans are the problem. It's not Al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda's not the problem. ISIS, who are beheading people and setting people on fire and invading different territories and, wreaking havoc in the Middle East and indoctrinating people to attack not only America but other countries as well. They're raping young children and teenagers and all the horrible things they're doing, combined with the old enemy, which seems really old school now. Al-Qaeda would just wait around and hope they could get lucky and bomb something like the Twin Towers or some big monument or something, and they would fail for decades, and then finally they'd get lucky. Unlike ISIS, who just decides to just march through the Middle East like tyrants and take over bit by bit by bit. You have all of these crazy psychos out there now, and the Department of Justice has now decided that, no, those people aren't the problem. That's not who we need to be focusing our attention on. We need to be focusing our attention on anti-government viewpoints. So if you're a person who is anti-government, clearly you're the problem. It's not, contrary to what we've been telling you since 9/11, since the day that we changed all these laws. We turned up the heat on Fourth Amendment violations to violate people's rights and their privacy and all that kind of stuff. All of those things, we're throwing all that out the window now. And what we have arrived at is a new conclusion that we completely missed the boat on all of those things. We were completely wrong on all those things. Forgive us. Oops. Sorry about that. What we really should have been doing all this time was concentrating on you damned Americans who are anti-government. We should now be focusing our attention for terrorism on Americans who have quote-unquote despicable beliefs. We should now focus the entire weight and force and power of the federal government on people who are bigots. Being a bigot is not a crime. There's nothing illegal about being a bigot. They are now focusing people who aren't even committing crimes. If you are just a bigot, and look, I'm not condoning being a bigot. I'm not saying that being a bigot is a good thing. No, God forbid. Being a bigot is probably not the best thing in the world. It's not illegal, though. It doesn't deserve the full force of the Department of Justice and the Anti-Terrorism Unit and Homeland Security and all of that. Come on now. It's a scary place we live in now. The best one to me, though, is the anti-government views. We're going to be focusing our attention on people with anti-government views. Allow me to quote one of the biggest anti-government people ever, and let's just all play Guess the Terrorist, because obviously this guy's a terrorist. If this guy were alive right now, and he's dead, he's passed, that's a clue for you. If this guy were alive right now, the United States government would have his phones tapped. They would have 24/7 surveillance on him. They would probably be looking at all of his financial records. He would have a tail on him 24/7. There's just no telling what they'd be doing to a guy that says this. Imagine saying this today, in today's times. When the people fear their government, there's tyranny. When the government fears the people, there is liberty. Well, let me tell you something. That is not what's happening today. When the government fears the people, there's the Domestic Terrorism Council, there's Homeland Security, there's the Department of Justice, there's the full force and power and might of the United States federal government. That's what you got to contend with. There's no liberty. You will sit down and shut up. Look, does anybody draw any kind of parallels between the path that the United States is taking today and the path that Nazi Germany took? Now, I know the whole Nazi Hitler thing gets thrown around a lot. I understand that gets thrown around a lot. You'll be like, oh, it's worse than Hitler. Or this is worse than Nazi Germany. And people use it as a way to dramatize and, to spread hyperbole and elevate things. Most of the time, I would say, for the most part, higher than any level that they should be. Let's just be honest about that. Okay? But there's some things that are heading in that direction. We've talked about on previous shows where if you are within 100 miles of the border anywhere in the United States, you can be searched and asked for your papers at any given time. And there's these checkpoints everywhere. Now, what parts of the country does that apply to? And we've gone over these in other podcasts before, but I'll cover it just briefly right now. First of all, it's the entire state of Florida. If you live anywhere in the state of Florida, you are subject to being stopped, have security checkpoints set up, and you have to present your papers. That's anywhere, because anywhere in Florida falls within 100 miles of the border. But it's most of the southern parts of all your southern states. You get over into your Arizonas and Texas and Californias. The southern part of Alabama falls into this line. I mean, there's a lot of South Alabama that falls into the 100-mile range of the border. It's really terrifying. Now, if you haven't seen those yet, and I haven't been through one yet, but I know that they're continuing to spread and propagate. I know that they are continuing to become more and more prevalent. You're starting to see them in more and more places. And I think it's just a matter of time before one is plopped down here in South Alabama, because the government isn't scared anymore. Trust me, the government isn't scared. The government has the United States citizens and the American people firmly in the grasp around the neck. And so now they're doubling down on that. Now that we have everybody into a state of compliance, into a state of fear, into a state of the government rules, what the government says is what should go. They're now doubling down on that and going further than that. Look, does this mean now? And I'll back off. Let me throw the number out there again in case you'd like to call in and be a part of the show. You can either just join us on Blab. If you're not familiar with that, You can just search for us on Blab IM and search for DOJ says Americans are more dangerous than ISIS, or I'm not sure else how you want me to just be honest with you? I'm just not really sure how else you find us on Blab. I'm really not. It's very new to me. I think our username would be blab.im/betbrett, I think. Is that right? Blab.im/betbrett. Maybe you can find us that way on Blab. But you can also call in on your phone. It's area code 334-403-4500. 334-403-4500 if you'd like to call in by phone. Look, I'm not saying that there aren't groups of people in the United States that are probably deserving of having an extra eye on them. I think they would be very small, and I think you would need a much more specific definition of who those groups are rather than the ones that the Department of Justice is using, which is very broad-based, widespread, and includes everybody I know. I don't think there's anybody I know that doesn't fit that description. I'm trying to think of how many people I know that are pro-government. I don't think I know that many people. I know a lot of bigots. And I know several people who have despicable beliefs. How generic is that? If I were to ask you right now to define what is a despicable belief, well, let's just change that. Let's say I were to ask 100 different people to define or give me an example of a despicable belief. Do you think I'd probably get 100 different answers? I'm sure there might be some lapse over. Let's just say you'd probably get 80 different answers. For every 100 people you ask, you'd probably get between 70 and 80 different unique and separate answers, because a lot of them would probably lapse over. So the United States government, the Domestic Terrorism Council, Department of Defense, Homeland Security is now all focusing their attention on the new threat to the America. And make no mistake about it, when they mean this, they mean threat to America, the government. They don't give a damn about you. They don't give a damn about threats to you as a person. They don't give a damn about threats to you as a community or as a family or as a group. It's threats to the government is what they care about. They're worried about threats to the government. If they were not, why else would the number one thing on the list be people who have anti-government views? That's number one on their list. Number one on our list of people that we're going to start targeting and focusing on now are people with anti-government views. People like Thomas Jefferson, who said, when the people fear their government, there's tyranny, and when the government fears the people, there's liberty. Let me ask you what you think we have more of in America now, tyranny or liberty? Because there's a whole hell of a lot more people who are wishing that we had less government right now. There's a whole hell of a lot more people who wishes that we could, in a way, get away from some of this government right now. Let there be no mistake about that. If you think for 1 second that any of this has to do with keeping you as a United States citizen safe right now, I think you'd probably be sorely mistaken. I think you'd probably be, well, I'm not really sure what I'd say about that. I think you'd probably be confused. Misguided might be another word I'd use. You really, I think probably one of the most dangerous things you can do as a people, probably one of the most dangerous things you can do as a society in general, is underestimate and take for granted the intentions of people with power. People with power are people who probably they probably fall into two categories. People with power, they fall into the category of people who are well-intentioned but don't understand unintended consequences, and I think that describes a lot of people in government today. There's a lot of people in government today who are well-intentioned, but they don't understand unintended consequences. This is why you see all these laws passed who and I'm not going to say it's liberals. Like my Republican friends would say, yeah, it's dang liberals. They always trying to pass these programs and they make the country worse and they make things for the worse. It comes from both sides. It's not just from one side. The Republicans pass laws that do the exact same thing. The Patriot Act would be my exhibit number one. They were well-intentioned. I'm not one of those people that believes that the federal government wanted to pass the Patriot Act at that time in the heat of the moment to control the American citizens for a bigger, greater power grab. Now, I could be wrong about that. Don't get me wrong. That's certainly possible. But I think at that time in our history, I think it falls on the side of being more likely that they were grasping at straws and trying to do things that they really thought would make our different law enforcement departments more cohesive in hopes of preventing another 9/11. But in that well-intentioned moment, they forgot about unintended consequences. And that was a great loss of freedom for American citizens. It was a great loss of freedom for people in the United States of America, the country that is supposed to be the greatest light and beacon of freedom in the world. Of course, we're not anymore. I think that's reasonably been established. The United States of America is no longer the freest nation in the world. I think we maybe still rank in the top 10, I hope, but we're certainly not at number one. But when you have, in the United States of America, when you have the Department of Justice saying they will create a new council that has one goal, and why is it, let me ask you this question. Why is it that we keep creating new government offices, new government agencies, more people in the government with power? We keep adding to. Like the government keeps growing. The people with guns keep growing. The people with badges keep growing. The people that can pass laws keep growing. The people who can fine you, kill you, put you in prison, label you as a terrorist, make your life a living hell. Why is it that those numbers of people keep growing and growing and growing and growing, larger and larger and larger, and we fund it? That's the most ironic thing about it. It's to our detriment as United States citizens, but we're the ones that fund it. Without us paying the taxes, there is no funding for them to create all these groups that they then turn around and use against you. So, they're going to create a new council that will coordinate the investigation and prosecution of anti-government and hate groups. Now, that is the most succinct description that I was able to find today of what it is that they are trying to do. I found some definitions that were more broad-based. I found some definitions that were had a lot more, descriptives in them to take it further. I read some of those at the beginning of the broadcast, and I'll repeat those. This was probably the most broad-based definition I found. Anti-government views, racism, bigotry, anarchy, and quote-unquote, this is still my favorite, despicable beliefs. I don't know how you define a despicable belief, but I know this. If you have a despicable belief, or something that they can label as a despicable belief, then they don't have to specify it, because then it all boils down to around, do they want to harass you? Do they want to question you? Do they want to imprison you? Because then all they got to say is, well, he had some despicable beliefs. And they don't, if you're not specific about what the despicable beliefs are up front, then you don't have any problem on the back end. Does that make sense? The more broad you are on the front side of your, it's not even a law really. It's just who they're targeting. But the same applies to laws. Like, I'll give you a good example. Police officers use the disturbing the peace. They use the resisting arrest. They use things like that, like disturbing the peace. A police officer can pretty much, and this is no way a diss at police officers. That's just the law, and that's the way it's applied. It's the way they're taught and the way they're trained, and it's a catch-all. They see you in a place that they don't think you should be, or they don't like you being there. They can get into your face a little bit, get you to be a little bit rowdy, get you to lip off a little bit. Bam, you're disturbing the peace. You're going to the hooscow. And that's the way of dealing with you, because you have a broad-based generic law that's not well defined, that can be applied to so many different situations that it becomes a catch-all for people in power to use against you. So the same thing we now find is happening with the Department of Justice and their new council that they're creating, this new domestic terrorism council, where they have this very broad and very open definition of who it is that they're going to be targeting. And I would submit to you to try to find a definition of any company, any group with any kind of goal in mind that has a broader, more generic, broad-based definition of what their goals are. They are going to follow people who, quote unquote, have anti-government views, are racists, are bigots, anarchists, or quote unquote have other despicable beliefs. He went on to further to say, we've recognized now that over the past few years, more people have died in this country in attacks by domestic extremists than in attacks associated with international terrorist groups. That's not just true of the past few years. That's been true since the dawn of time. Just because you've just now realized it and recognized it doesn't mean that suddenly that's something that has just suddenly became true. People inside America have always killed more people than people outside of America. That's just the way it is. That's going to be that way in any community. It's going to be that way in any type of large organization or country or region or continent. It's the proximity doctrine. I mean, people who are closer in proximity to each other are always going to be more of a danger to each other than people who are in a further proximity from each other. I mean, that's just common sense. There's nothing brilliant about that. There's nothing particularly eye-opening about that. There's nothing particularly, something that requires you to have an IQ of 150 to understand that. It's the same principle that applies to you're more likely to get into an accident if you are within a mile of your house than if you are further away from the mile of the house. Why? Because it's the proximity rule. You spend more time driving within a mile of your house. Most people do 80-90% of their driving within 1 mile of their house. Well, if you spend 90% of your time doing an activity in a certain location versus only 10% of your time doing activity in another location, the chances of you having an accident are going to happen in the 90% location. It doesn't mean there's anything more dangerous about being at home. It doesn't mean that there's anything more dangerous about, driving down the 2 streets over by Jim Bob's house. It's just a proximity rule. You spend more time in a certain location, and just by default, you're going to have a higher chance of having an accident there. The same thing applies to terrorism and people in the United States and the people that are causing more deaths in the country. If you are someone who, is a little bit perturbed, you're a little, let's say you got I'm going to use this because I can't think of a better phrase. I don't literally mean it that you have an itchy trigger finger like you have a gun, but I just mean that's your personality and that's your disposition. If you're a person like that and you begin to associate with other people like that, eventually it's going to boil over, and the people that you're going to lash out at are going to be the people down the street from you, or the people across the street, or the people downtown. Just by a matter of proximity, that's what's more likely to happen. And then you have the whole technical aspect of putting something together and carrying it out half a world away. How much easier is it, and how much more likely is it that some guy 4 streets over from me is going to wig out one day and open fire than for some people who live in a third world country who barely can afford shoes on their feet to somehow get the resources and the backing and have the ability to find their way all the way across the ocean, make it into the United States of America, make it into my neighborhood and shoot me? It's just much more or less likely. So it's all about proximity. The whole thing is about proximity, and it's not anything new. As a matter of fact, if you think about it, it's quite remarkable that this seems to be something that they're just now understanding. If you think about how these are supposed to be the best and brightest people protecting us, United States citizens, from great dangers like this, how remarkable is it that they have just now come to the conclusion that homegrown extremists remains more of a threat to us than people who live a half a world away. They go on to make correlations between groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda and people who they consider a threat here in the United States. And they specifically mentioned the Ku Klux Klan or anti-government extremists. See, I'd really like a definition of what an anti-government extremist is. Is it somebody like me who believes in the smallest government possible? Well, I have a problem with government. But I believe the government, one, needs to be as small as possible and do the minimum amount of things necessary to keep the country running. Two, require the most minimum amount of funding possible just to be a bare bones operation. And three, stand aside and give the citizens the maximum amount of liberty and give the citizens the benefit of the doubt at all times and at all costs. So you need to be more specific. You need to be able to define more specifically what it is that you mean by anti-government extremist. I would argue that it needs to be somebody who is intent on and shows intent, not you had some FBI agent go dupe some poor dim-witted person with an 85 IQ into wanting to bomb somebody. Not that, like you're so good at doing and then claiming success. I mean somebody that literally is gearing up to make an attack on an innocent person, whether that person be in the government or not. Because there are some whack jobs out there. Look, I'm not denying the fact that there are some whack jobs out there. I'm not denying the fact that there's people out there who would go to an extreme, who would go overboard, who would lose their mind to do horrible, horrible things and carry out what would be considered domestic terrorist attacks on the government. I'm not saying that that's not possible. But I'm saying that needs to be more defined. He goes on to say, what causes a lot of confusion is that quote unquote domestic terrorism is not an offense or a charge. They're looking to change that though. Domestic terror groups or actors must be prosecuted with firearms or explosive charges, hate crimes, or murder. Now, why do you need a special charge when charging somebody with murder will work? See, I'm not a proponent of hate crimes legislation. If I'm a green person and you hate green people and you kill me because you hate green people, or I'm a white southern redneck and you kill me because you want my truck, I'm the same amount of dead in both of those. I'm the same amount of dead in both of those circumstances. And my family and my friends and people who love me are grieving the same amount in both of those circumstances. One person isn't more dead than the other one. One family isn't grieving more than the other one. Hate crimes are stupid. Hate crimes are something people dreamed up just to pacify activists to make them feel better about things. So I'm definitely not a fan of hate crimes. And this, what he's saying here is one of those reasons, because it opens up a door to get more charges that they can ensnare you in. Look, you want more criminals? This is something people don't understand. Do you want more criminals? Do you think America would be better off if we had more criminals? Just answer that question first. Just think about it for a second. Let it swirl around in your head a little bit. Do you think the United States of America would be better off if we had more criminals? Now, I can't answer for you. I'm just going to answer for myself. And I think the answer to that question is no. I think the answer is we need less criminals. I don't want to live in a country with more criminals. Now, Secondarily, follow-up question. How do you get more criminals? How does a country get more criminals? You pass more laws. It's simple. You want more drug dealers? Make more drugs illegal. Back in the days of prohibition, you want more shine runners and you want more mobsters and people running illegal alcohol rings. Make alcohol illegal. Before alcohol was illegal, you had none of those. You had no kinds of moonshine runners, mob-connected, alcohol, underground. None of that existed. None of that existed. It didn't exist because the law didn't exist. As soon as they passed the law, then suddenly you had all of these people were now criminals. Many of them just, some good old boy who was just trying to make some extra money from his family, and he knew a Jim Bob down the street that liked to drink alcohol and wanted to buy it. People that technically, yes, broke a law, but should the law have ever been a law in the first place? This is the same thing that I apply to marijuana possession, which now has just so many hundreds of thousands of people in prison now because they had a freaking joint, because they were rolling up a joint and smoking it. Look, if you disagree with smoking weed, don't smoke it. But the evidence is very clear. The weed is nowhere near a category alcohol is, and you can buy alcohol on any street corner in the United States of America. Weed is actually better. It makes people more docile. It makes people more passive. It definitely relieves stress, and it also just happens to have some medical benefits to it. Now, you can make the argument that there's some red wines that have some medical benefits to them. I think those are the cases are a lot fewer on those. Nevertheless, my point is, you add new laws, you add new criminals. You want to find more terrorists in the United States? Answer that question for me. Do you want to find more terrorists? Yes or no? I would like to find more terrorists in the United States of America. You know how you do that? You broaden the definitions of what constitutes a terrorist. What could we possibly broaden the definitions to that would allow us to arrest more terrorists and put on the books that in 2016, by God, we arrested 40% more terrorists than we did in the 3 years prior. Why? Because you made more people terrorists. Anti-government view people are now terrorists. People who are bigots are now terrorists because you're a bigot. There's nothing illegal about being a bigot. There's something illegal about punching somebody in the face. We already have a law for that. So if you're a bigot and you don't like gay people, let's say you're a bigot and you don't like gay people, and you go punch some gay guy in the face. The crime is that you punch the guy in the face. We already have laws on the books for people who punch other people in the face. We don't need to label bigots as terrorists. Someone who has despicable beliefs? I bet I got a host of beliefs somebody would probably think are despicable. I don't know. I'm not going to go through them all right now. I'm not going to expose myself to that on the show right now. I probably at least have one or two beliefs that somebody would consider despicable. But what's illegal about that? That I have despicable beliefs, or that I took my despicable beliefs and I went down to the corner and I found somebody that represented that or was a segment of that despicable belief I have, and I stabbed them with a knife. Well, we already have laws on the book about not stabbing people with a knife. It's already illegal to stab somebody with a knife. You don't have to label people with despicable beliefs as terrorists to arrest and imprison somebody who stabbed somebody with a knife. On the other hand, if you want to arrest more terrorists and pad your numbers and put more fear into the citizenry and get more control over the United States citizens, then make having despicable beliefs a crime. Make having anti-government views a crime. Anti-government views? Are you really telling me that's a crime now? I have anti-government views. I'm not going to hurt anybody. Do a little podcast, bitch and complain, make some posts on Facebook, talk with some friends of mine about how maybe we could elect some people to clean things up in Washington. I'm not a threat to anybody. On the other hand, you may find some person who has anti-government views that'll take a bomb and throw it into a Capitol building and kill 50 people. Well, look, we already have laws on the books about people who throw bombs into the Capitol and kill 50 people. There's already a law on the books to handle that. You don't have to label me a terrorist to handle that situation. We already have laws on the books for that. Ronald Reagan, who was an okay guy, I don't think by any stretch of the imagination he's the best president or even in the top 10 that we've ever had, but I know he gets a lot of respect from people. The thing I'll say about Ronald Reagan was he leaned libertarian. I'll give him credit for that. But he had a lot of mainstream Republican type views, which weren't good. But he said one of the greatest statements that's ever been said by any person in American history. And it's that people aren't the problem. The government is the problem. There was a point in our history when the government was much, much, much smaller. And the United States of America faced crises. We faced crises of different natures, different types, different origins. And during that period of time, other things were the problem. And it'd be surprising to know that in many of those, most of those, maybe all of those, it would depend on what time period you're talking about in our history, the government and what it could do was actually the solution. There has been a point in time when that was the case. But in modern times, I can assure you without any doubt or reservation that for nearly every ill that the United States of America faces right now, nearly everyone down to a T, I'm going to make some exceptions. Look, there's some things that are bad, there's some things that are wrong that don't fall in this category. But by and large, most problems that we face as Americans today come because of the government, because of draconian laws, because of abuse of power, because of lust, greed, ignorance, stupidity, well intentions with unintended consequences, many, many reasons. So you don't have to be a bad person in government to make bad things happen. I think there's been many good people in government that made really bad things happen because they were well intentioned, but they were not smart enough to see the unintended consequences that would follow. This is why our founders tried their damnedest to make passing laws, legislation, regulation. They tried to make it very hard for that to get done. People talk about how horrible gridlock in Washington is. By golly, we got to stop this gridlock in Washington. No, gridlock is one of the best things that ever happened in Washington. It should be damned hard to get a law passed. If you believe that another law needs to be added to the 7-foot tall stack of laws that we have now, if you want to add another law to that, it should be damned hard for you to get that law passed. You should have to fight tooth and nail. You should have to spend months and months and months and months meeting with everybody on Capitol Hill, every other senator, every other person from the House of Representatives, talks with the cabinet and the president of the United States. You should consult with lawyers on the legality and constitutionality of it. You should have to do all these things. It should take, for a law to pass, it should take years. It should take 5 years for a law to pass. And then, if you get lucky enough, if you work hard enough, if you try hard enough and finally get a law passed, that's probably proof enough that it's a law that was needed. But I would go further and say there should be a 5-year sunset on all laws that are passed. In 5 years, all laws go away. And the only way you keep them on the books is to have government go back and revisit them. You have to convince everybody that they're still good. You have to show some evidence that they've improved things rather than made them worse. And if you can't do that, the law goes away and it's gone. Nevertheless, I think I'll do a whole nother podcast on that issue and that subject. I think I've said probably enough about that. That's a whole show into itself. The gist of this podcast today is to let you know of what your federal government thinks and what it's planning. They are creating an entire new government agency, an entirely new bureaucracy with the power to make your life a living hell. It's called the Domestic Terrorism Council. And the Domestic Terrorism Council is designed to sit over and have purview over groups who they believe are, quote, people with anti-government views, people who are racist, people who are bigots, people who are anarchists, and people who, quote, have despicable beliefs. Do you see how wide open those are and how subjective those definitions are and what kind of life we're about to have? I don't know how many people listening to this podcast have ever seen someone they know personally be dragged in by federal agents and be put under the microscope. But I promise you, at the rate we're going, sometime within the next 5 to 10 years, everybody listening to this will know at least one person that was dragged in and scrutinized for things they've posted on Facebook, things they said to their coworkers, something they said on their cell phones that's bugged by everybody now. Something you did or said will open you up to being called in and put under scrutiny. We're going back to the days of, are you a communist? I think he's a communist. Oh, he's definitely a communist. I know what I heard him say the other day. And they're going to be coming after you. The government's loving it. The government's eating it up. The government is eating it up. They've turned you against each other. They turned us all against each other, and they've put the infrastructure in place to wreak havoc down upon all of our lives. Thank you for listening to the podcast. A reminder that you can subscribe to the podcast. It's very easy to do. On iTunes, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, YouTube. We're on all those platforms. Just search for Brett Mason Show. We also have a free iOS and Android app. It makes it really easy to get the podcast when we're live. You get a notification so you can listen to the live show, or you can listen to it later at your leisure. All you have to do is search in your appropriate app stores, whether it be for Android or iOS. Search for Brett Mason Show. BRETTMASON, Brett Mason Show. Visit us online at brett-mason.com. Yep, there's a dash in there. Brett-mason.com. And I really appreciate it. We're on Blab. I don't know the Blab address because I don't understand Blab. I think it's blab.im/BetBrett because that's my username on Twitter, and I think that's what it uses. But I couldn't be sure about that. But I think that's possible. If you go follow us on there, that'd be great. You can jump on the podcast on video from your phone or from your laptop. Be a part of the discussion. Be a part of the video. I think that would be fantastic. And thanks for listening and checking us out today. See ya.
Love him or hate him, you know what you're going to get. This is the Brett Mason Show.